beyond yourself, outside of yourself, we have to find community. And what is that? That's a common unity. What do we have in common that unifies us? When you know who you are, where you stand, and you practice those approaches to knowing oneself, I think then you can move into a community with authenticity, and then you can have these common threads like food that brings us all together. And if we were to teach the principles of the nature stories that we originally got, we would be good gardeners and guardians of the planet, man. That's like what I've learned.
Welcome, dear ones. How are you enjoying our new timeless editions? It's always lovely to hear from you, so please do get in touch and share how this is landing with you. All that we are is very much about you, as much as it is us and our guests. And so we want to know how you're experiencing it and what's coming through for you, and to create a web that connects all of us with all of this wisdom and all of these ideas in a way that we can embody it and therefore create a culture. We will be sharing more very soon on our new membership as we relaunch Presence Collective, which will give us the space to explore how we create beauty in the mess, and will connect us deeper through events that are live online and practices, tools, what we need for these times. Make sure you are on our newsletter list for more on this and all of our offerings. You can join this over at allthatweare.org. My guest today is Darren Le Baron, an educator specialising in mycology and psychedelic research, and is based in the UK and the Caribbean. Known around the world for his Shroomshop Master classes and mushroom educational programs, he is a keen cultivator and teacher. He has been growing gourmet and medicinal mushrooms for over 13 years and has translated his home-growing experiences into a social enterprise. His achievements include launching the UK's first accredited Mycology and Mushroom Cultivation course for schools and young people, providing hands-on experience to empower school children and at-risk youth. Darren is a knowledgeable and dynamic speaker who is passionate about sharing his research and findings on ethnomycology, ancient African plant medicines, and their various applications. He is a member and presenter at the London Psychedelic Society, a chair and Breaking Convention committee member. He is also a regular presenter at the Detroit Psychedelic Conference, Ozora, Noisily and Lightning in a Bottle festivals, as well as numerous gatherings around the world, sharing his extensive research on psychedelics and how they can help support humanity in the here and now. He is also an organic horticulturist and permaculture tutor who supports schools, businesses, and so-called hard-to-reach communities around the world to create holistic and sustainable working systems. Collectively, his work aims to inform and empower individuals from diverse backgrounds to cope with social challenges and contribute to community development as well as self-improvement in an innovative, creative, culturally aware style. You heard him on our recent We Are Change episode, speaking on a panel, and it was so great to have this opportunity to sit down with him and go deep one-on-one. In this conversation, called Mushrooms and Mycelium, Nature's Network, we explore the themes of psychedelics, community, and gardening as we speak to the question, what if we are mushrooms having a human experience? We hope that this conversation deepens your relationship with this life in beautiful and powerful ways. Welcome to All That We Are, with me, your host, Amisha Tala Oak. On this show, we explore the weave between activism, the sacred, creativity, and regeneration, the spaces where our inner and outer worlds dance. From healing trauma to nature connection, to new technologies, to ancient wisdom, it's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a more beautiful future. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to listen, to ask ourselves the big questions and to share what we are already doing and envisioning. We create the futures of our wildest dreams, and we begin to embody all that we are becoming, and all that is possible.
Darren, it is an absolute delight to be spending this rainy, grey moment in Hackney with you. Welcome to All That We Are.
I appreciate the invitation to come and share with you.
What comes alive for you when I ask, what are the futures of your wildest dreams?
So for me, it's personally the same thing that I've always wanted, and that's just like connections, deeper connections. And, you know, I've always dreamt, visualized, but intended to manifest connections for myself with others, with my community, and then my community with other communities, and other communities with other communities, so that we can all be ambassadors, you know, and diplomats on the behalf of our individuality, our family, our community, so then we can share and exchange. I say that to say that many years, it's funny that, well, it's not funny, it's just synchronicity that we're in Hackney, because, you know, after I left my family home, where I was raised, this is where I came to live and where I started to do my works, personal works of self-development, and then my community work. So I had to make those connections with myself, and I started to make those connections in the community. And it was always about, you know, bringing people together. And so for me, in the here and now, utilizing mushrooms as a tool, as a technology, it's like I'm just doing the same thing, you know. But when I first started, I was doing it with football, I was doing it with music, I was doing it with creative arts, just using these tools, these formulas to bring people together, to create a common thread, a common narrative. I've used food in the past, or, you know, horticulture. And I've got to a place and space now where mushrooms and mycelium are the ways that I connect and bring people together. So I will just continue to visualize and manifest those connections for myself, for others, for communities, so that we can still continue to do that work.
What is the importance of community and the difference between, say, where you can go by yourself, like in your own personal journey, and what happens when you do it in community and that kind of collective experience? I love how you say, like, it's mushrooms now, but for music, there's so many food, like there's so many ways that we gather, and culturally, every culture has always had ways that they gather that are based around food or spirituality in some way, or music and play. You know, we're in this sort of funny time that we're in right now where we have such strong cultures, yet we've also got this kind of global consumerist culture that's kind of trying to take over.
My perspective and approach has always been, you know, like what true sacred union is about, you know, unity. So, you know, first and foremost, it has to be from within, you know, and that's where beyond yourself, outside of yourself, we have to find community. And what is that? That's a common unity. What do we have in common that unifies us? So for me, it's really important that you take that inward journey, that personal journey, that solo journey that you can do, but should do, you know, by yourself, alone, sometimes in the dark, with nothing extra, nothing beyond just you and what's going on inside of you, and to have that deep sense of self and knowing who you are, where you're coming from, because we can be easily influenced beyond yourself, friends, family, you know, TV, all of these influences and distractions at the same time. But when you know who you are, where you stand, and you practice those approaches to knowing oneself, I think then you can move into a community with authenticity, and then you can have these common threads like food that brings us all together. I always say with like my young students, like when we look at all of our division, the point I'm making, like being here in Hackney, I've done a lot of work with communities in Hackney, and we're in one part of Hackney as far as a young person that doesn't get on with other people in other sides of Hackney, you know, just the other side of this park that we're on, you know, and there's rivalries. But the whole thing was like, well, what brings us together? As I said, football has in the past, music has in the past, but I found food is definitely a thing that brings, like, we all eat food. So utilizing these common threads, and utilizing that as a way that, okay, so we all eat food, but what's your favorite food? And then you have a favorite food or things that you like, and they're going to be different from mine. There's differences. There's a union, but then there's differences. And it's through those unions and differences that we create, genuine dialogue. So it's like, my favorite food is pizza. Someone could say, I'd be like, so what's your favorite toppings on a pizza? And I'm like, oh, my favorite toppings are pineapple. And I'll be like, pineapple? Pineapples don't go on, pizza. Then you get this division again, divide, but it's a union of discussion that brings us together. And for me, that's just like what I like about humans, and like the union, but the diversity, what makes us unique, what makes us different, what separates us, but then how it ebbs and flows and brings us back together. And I think that's like the amazing thing about our species and all species, like all the cats, is like, you saw this beautiful cat, that's all these different types of cats, they're cats, but then there's different types of cats, they look different, and but what brings them together, and I just think like all species have that abilities, and then as this one big organism that we are all part of, all species, it's like all those differences, but then we come together and ebb back as this like one organism, one species, Gaia, or whatever you may refer it as.
And often we realize that, like, okay, we didn't think that we liked pineapple on pizza, mostly because we'd never had it, and then you try it and you're like, oh, that's right, that. And then you catch yourself ordering it one day.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, it's like often our differences are perceived rather than real. Often our differences come from a place of just not knowing and not understanding.
You got it. I feel that, going back to the pineapple thing, people be like, you don't have fruit on pizzas, but it's not meant to. And I'm like, well, tomatoes are fruit. That's the base of it. And it's an opportunity to educate, to learn, but then to experience. Like you said, then you taste it, it's like, well, it's actually not that bad. And it's like, okay. And I've had those experiences in life. I still continue to do, things that you think you don't like, you may not like. That could be something that you're eating or something you're about to experience. I went paintballing a few weeks ago, with the guys, and like, in my mind, at the time in the current climate that we're in, picking up a gun and shooting people was just not, I'm like, oh. But it was a friend of mine's birthday, and he's like, again, he's got access to it. But I went there, and it was like, it brought us together. There was a union amongst us, and, there was an energy, and I realized, I exercised this energy that's inside of me that I wouldn't have exercised otherwise, in a way that was friendly fire, in that regard. But then it brought, like a brotherhood together. And, initially I was like, I'm not going to, I didn't want to go. It wasn't, not that I didn't want to go, but I was just having thoughts about going. Is that where I want to be and spending my Thursday at that time? But I'm glad I went and I had that experience. And then beyond that, I've made a connection with some other brothers that were part of it who I didn't know. And, it was just like, okay, yeah, sometimes it's like those ebbs and flows. And that's like feelings within and then how they manifest, without.
What was it that opened you up to wanting to like work in that way of bringing communities together and nurturing like communities? And I know I asked the question, like, what was it? I'm not expecting you to say like, there was one day where like this happened. Like, what was that energy, that knowing, that yearning like inside you that took you there? Because, we can go in so many different directions.
Well, for me, it was more not knowing. It was the not knowing that was the inspiration. And for me, it goes back as early as like me being in nursery and primary school, that era of not knowing and wanting to know and not getting the answers that satisfied my spirit, my soul, by way of my teachers at that time would have been my mother initially, and nursery and school teachers, just feeling like I don't know, and I've got the feeling that they don't know, and I really want to know. And it was through me navigating and unpacking that and getting to know things and then sharing what I thought I knew and inspiring people as young as I can remember to be like, so where do you get that from? How do you know that? It's like, oh, I've done my research. I've done my Googles before Googles. I was going to the libraries, I was checking this out. And that in itself made me realize that, as somebody in school, nursery, and then amongst my peers, that it created interesting dialogue, because I realized that, oh, we're just like accepting what we're being told. as I said, like, I didn't know if I was being told the truth or not, but I just felt like my teachers at that time didn't know. And I said, that was the thing. Like, it's been as early as that, so I'll give an example being, I went to from nursery, I went to nursery in Shoreditch, I went to secondary school in Holborn, Camden areas. And all of my education was like Roman Catholic education. So pretty much, given, the notion of, all of the celebrations, at least the Easters and the Christmases and these narratives, these stories, these traditions that we are introduced to as children. And it just not making sense to me. Me being able to do the maths and it like, oh, I get what you're saying, but it just doesn't add up. It just doesn't add up. And me asking questions and being told that you can't ask those questions or you shouldn't ask those questions, or them not being able to give me the answers. It's like, I don't know, but it makes me know that you don't know either, because you're not able to give me, you're not able to satisfy my diet, my hunger for wanting to know. And then that was the inspiration for me. Like, let me go and find out these things. Let me find out, because they're saying it's not possible to know, or it's, you're not going to find the answers to these things, these big questions, but saying, no, I'm going to go out and try and find out, check it out for myself. And then eventually coming back and saying, what the teacher was telling us isn't correct. You know what, that such and such isn't the truth. And like, well, how do you know? Like, I don't know, but this is what I found out. And these were the beginnings, the early days of me saying, yo, come, like, check this out. Why don't you read this book? Why don't you see what I'm seeing? Can you see what I'm seeing? And that, that's just led over years and years of being amongst friends into teenage years of, let's go left. And I'm saying, no, let's go right. This just doesn't, that's just, like, why are you going right for? Why are you trying to be different? Why are you trying to be difficult? It's like, no, I'm not trying to be different or difficult. It's just like, we're just going with what the status is. And it just doesn't feel right to me. And then later on down the line, people like believing in like, it was a good decision that we went right and didn't go left. Why did you decide to go, and that was, these were the things that were happening in life that later I became more conscious of that and deliberate with that to then make things happen. Like, whoa, if me and my friends are now in our teens, late teens, moving into adulthood and realizing that we've been misinformed, we've been lied to, we've been told to go left and we should have gone right, or at least been given the option to go left or right. Let's make the decision for yourself. Let's make sure for future generations, for people come beyond us, that we give them those options, man, and let them make conscious decisions for themselves. And then I started to organize things and be more deliberate with, these ideas that were coming through.
And what do you see in like the relationship between going left or right and everything that's kind of there around young people and like the struggles that they're having and men and mental health? There's so much like around all of that in this current modern climate that we're in. What do you see around like with the people that you work with and the experiences that you've had?
Well, primarily we've got kind of like a society with this kind of one size fits all model, which just doesn't work. We've seen over years, decades and generations now that it doesn't work. We are all bespoke. We are all unique. So I can understand with education, unless you've got loads of money, you're not going to be able to get a bespoke education. You're going to get a generic education. You're going to get a generic tutelage, and that may not fit you. And many people then are taught to fit into things. It's like putting on a pair of shoes that are too tight or too big. It's like, it's not that they don't fit. That doesn't fit me. And then not having the option, not having the choice. If you don't have the option, don't have the choice, and you're so, well, look, this is all you've got. You've got to put these tight shoes on. You've got to put these things that doesn't fit you well. And then you're then putting, you've got tight shoes on, you're walking day in, day out, you're going to get corns and bunions, and it's just not going to feel comfortable. It's not going to be right. And that's what we've got in society. A lot of people that I'll just say, they're faking the funk, being something that they're not because of the status quo, because this is all we've been told we're meant to do. So for a young person, that we've all experienced pretty much like, okay, so you're born, you get up, start moving through life, you go to school, you get a job, you go through those processes, and it's like, maybe that's not what was designed for you. And people say, no, but he was born to be, this is like, no, nobody's really born to be anything until you discover, and and if you're not given the opportunity to really discover, you might feel like, you know what? I didn't know that I would like pineapple on pieces until I tried it. Yeah. I didn't know that I would like painting until I tried it. It's like, you've got to give a young person all the options, all the opportunities to experience all the things possible that they can, rather than saying, no, you just got to do English, maths, geography, You know, these are the subject matters that you're going to cover, and you've got to work your life off what you're going to do, your next step based on these things, because these are the important subjects to, you know, to get your head around. And you might be like, oh, I just wanted to color in. I just like coloring in. That's all I ever wanted to do was coloring in. And you're told, oh no, you can't color in for life. That's not a serious job. That's not a serious career. You can't make a living through coloring in. And then you become an adult. It's like, okay, I'm just going to do data entry because that's all that's all I can do. And then you find out that, man, I just wanted to color in. And then you get to a point in your life where you might be having a midlife crisis, man, because really, I just wanted to color in. And I've been doing this for the last 20, 30 years. And, you know, and I've met people in my life who color in for a living. They run art galleries, you know, they just been painting and coloring in. And I wasn't given that option. And that's what's going on, you know, a lot in adulthood. But going back to just the purpose of like young people and the challenges they face, like they're not really given the options of like what they want to do. So if the child, you know, if the child is like, I just want to play computer games, you'd be like, shit, in the world now, man, playing computer games may dull your your life experiences. But we're in a current climate where, as you know, young people are just on their phones, on their computers, on their laptops, on these consoles. So rather than me say it's the wrong thing, it's the bad thing, it's like, let me encourage you, inspire you, maybe to be, I don't know, like a creator of a computer game. Like, let me find, like, are you really into this? If you're really into this, let me not tell you that that's not an option for you. You can't go that way. You need to go this way. It's like, okay, if that is the route that you're going, let me give you whatever I can in support or tools to be able to go to do that route and fulfill your, you know. And then you might come to a point where it's like, I ain't here to just make computer games, or I'm going to make a computer game that changes the world. It's going to be different from, but if you've not been given that option, then and you're just told this is all you've got. And that's what I was being told. And I didn't like that. And that's why I became that challenging student in school. It's like, this is not what I'm trying to do. In all honesty, when people ask me, so what did you want to do when you was young? I used to say, like, I don't want to do anything. I actually just want, like, I just want to do what I want to do. It's like, you can't do that. It's like, I don't know what it is that I want to do, but I just want to wake up in the morning and just do whatever it is I want to do. And it's like...
So you didn't believe that the divine had made you for data entry?
There you go. There you go. There you go. It's like, yeah. And it's like, then it's like, I'm told like, no, you've got to pick a career. In school, you've got options now. What are my options? Oh, you can be this, you can be that. It's like, well, out of these 5 options, none of them resonate. I don't want to do any of that. And then I had to fake the funk. I had to be like, okay, I want to be... at that time, I was thinking, I want to get into being a physiotherapist because I didn't really want to. But I was thinking, well, I want to get into football. I like football. I want to get into football at that time. And I learned that not many people make it in football. You know, all the options of young people out there and how many people had actually become a football player. But if I wanted to be in football, there's a way in. I could be a referee. I could be a physiotherapist. I started looking at all these other options. But really, that's not what I wanted to do. I realized when I started to study, it's like, this is not what I want to do. What makes me happy, what makes me feel good. And that's when I just started doing the things that made me happy, made me feel good. And it's what I'd still do to this day, you know, rather than the options that were presented to me at that time that just didn't fit well.
And it takes something to be able to see the options outside of what's being presented, which perhaps brings us to what it means to be a mushroom, having a human experience.
Yeah, man. So that's what I do. I go around telling people that they are mushrooms, you know, and that's because that's what they are. I always say whether they like it or not, accept it or not, you know, it comes from several schools of thought, several pathways. You know, just how I got into that, interestingly enough, was like going back. You know, I had to go back. It's actually where I'm going to Barbados. It's actually my very first trip to Barbados. It was 20 plus years ago. And I was, you know, went there for the very first time. And I was in a tech space. At that time, I was in like, you know, mobile phones and stuff were happening or new. And, you know, I was just into stuff at that time. And I got to Barbados for the first time and really reconnected with my true self, that young self, that version of me that loved being out in nature, just loved playing. So what do you want to do? I just want to play. I just want to go out and play. And I went to Barbados as an adult and I was playing. And I got to play in nature. I reconnected with the land, reconnected with the soil, reconnected with my family, or connected for the first time with particular family members, reconnected with some. And it was just like a whole just reconnecting with the soil. And through that, I came back to the UK, having a young child who was 9 months old at that time and wanting to be able to feed my child good food, you know, good food, knowledge, wisdom, but actual tangible food as well. So I knew at that time that I wasn't going to be sending my children to school. That was the goal. And I wasn't going to be giving them this computer food. I had to provide them real food and real education. And when I came back, I went back to study. I came back to the UK, was inspired to learn about soil, to learn about food growing. I just wanted to grow strawberries. That was my goal. I just want to grow some strawberries and more beyond that. And it was through that studying of going back to, so I actually went to my local farmers market and was invited to volunteer at a community project, Organically. In fact, I'll give them a shout out, Organically, which is like just at the edge of Epping Forest. And I was invited to start the volunteering program. And it was through that volunteering program that I ended up studying and doing my level 1, then my level 2 in organic food growing. And then I done my entry to permaculture. And then I done my full permaculture design. It was through this whole journey of 2-3 years that mycelium kept on coming up, which I was hearing for the very first time, do my level 1. And then I was loving composting. I was loving soil science. And then I found out the magic behind both of them was this thing called mycelium. And this thing connects things. And I'm like, this is what I've been doing. I was actually working on a project called Making Ends Meet at that time. And it was a music project. And it was based on different young people groups that I was working with from the different estates. We bring ends together. That's what they call the hoods, communities, the ghettos, the different ends. I was bringing different ends together to make financial ends meet. So let's come together and set up entrepreneurial programs as, young people in the creative arts space. And I was like, this mycelium makes ends meet. It was like, I saw the principle of what I was doing in my world at that time within what I was learning in this horticulture thing, that the mycelium connects things, it gains things from what it connects with food, and it exchanges things and gives things back. And that's what I was sharing with the young people, like, yo, we're all making music. Rather than you make music over there, you make music over there, you make music over there. What if we had one studio? Like, we're paying one rent rather than 3 separate rents of studio time. Why don't we invest and then we all can get something out of it? And I was like, this is how this mycelium works. And as I started seeing these principles of mycelium, I realized, that's how I kind of operate and function. Not just me, Darren, that's how we as humans function and operate. And over a period of time in digesting more and more mushrooms of different persuasions, I realized that, all of this stuff that I was learning about soil and composting, this recycling, this renewing, is what I was learning in school. That's what I was teaching me about Jesus and the death and the rebirth. I saw the principles there. And then it's the same thing I was learning in other areas of composting. You put the banana peel on this heap and it takes it, it transforms it and turns it into something new. It renews it. And that's what we do, like our body. And of course it would do that because we come from the soil. We come from the same soil that the mycelium is processing and taking those stuff, making it new. That's led me to years later to say, we're actually mushrooms having a human experience. Like, this whole organism is, based upon this same cycle, these principles. And whether it's physical, tangible processes that I can share with people and or metaphorical, for me, it's all there, man. Like, we come from this organism that is facilitated and held space by the mycelium network. And everything that's ever come out of the soil is connected to it, man. Yeah, man, that's kind of like where I come from with it all.
How does somebody that doesn't really understand what mycelium is go a little bit deeper into recognizing it?
If we go back to move forward or forward to move back, people may be aware of what mushrooms are. So when we think of mushrooms, some mushrooms are the fruiting bodies of fungus. So mushrooms are like the apple on the tree. And the apple, as you know, is connected to a whole system. So these mushrooms that we see appearing out of the soil, out of compost heaps, they're connected to a network, to a system. That system being the fungus, and the whole network itself is known as mycelium. Those are the threads, the strands, the fiber optics of the network. And it enables nutrients, data, and information to be distributed, not just for the mushrooms themselves, but those networks connect to the root systems of other trees and plants and provide, nutrients and information and data to those things too. But then all the other microorganisms that are in the soil are dependent upon this superhighway that enables nutrients, data, and information to be distributed. So if you understand the internet, you understand mycelium. If you understand your central nervous system, you understand mycelium, because it's these principles that are through and through the soil, through and through into your body, through and through into the cosmos too. It's as above, so below, as within, so without. So it's this network.
Beautiful. That's an amazing, clear description. How do we understand the role of mushrooms and being a mushroom through time And this was something that when I saw your talk, I was like, oh, this is really fun. And it's a vast question. So let's also just acknowledge, this is just going to be like a little taste.
Yeah, man. Well, we can unpack it, man, because going back, so my approach to learning and studying anything, no matter what subject matter you give me, my brain works like, let's go to the source of this information as far back as we can and see what's going on. That was what I was talking about when I was in primary school, when I was getting a lot of problems or challenging my teachers. I'll be like, so if this Adam and Eve stuff is real, when was it? How far back? What date? Give me the dates. Give me the yeah, we don't know. It's like, then you don't know. What are you talking about? That was what I used to be like, but I'm still like that, but I've been able to be a bit more diplomatic in how I approach it. So in my own studies, I challenge myself in the same way. Like, how far can we go back? So if this mushroom stuff, like, where are mushrooms from? Where do they go back to? And I look at it from two lenses or two pathways at least. And one is through mythology, oral traditions and mythology, and what the science say. And both of them say pretty much the same thing, and I prefer mythology because I'm into mythology and history and indigenous cultures and hearing the stories and narratives. And they talk about, in many traditions, but even the biblical lens, the African lens, you go to Asia, and they talk about mushrooms or this organism that we know, planet Earth, starting through way of non-earthly phenomena. And that would what we would call extraterrestrial or aliens. And some people say that just sounds far-fetched, but science says the same thing too. But mythology suggests that there were astral bodies, I would say UFOs. If we go for it, there were UFOs, as I say, which we now know are IFOs, because we've identified that these flying objects were meteorites and asteroids that had impacted, arrived to this planet, and they brought passengers. And those passengers were the spores. The spores are like the seeds of the mushrooms, and the spores came, arrived. Some of them ended up in the oceans, in the waters, and some of them ended up hitting the bedrock. And that was all that was here. Earth wasn't all green and lush as it was now. And what mushrooms had to do, the spores had to hook up and connect with some of the life force that was in the oceans. And the first living organism to make it out of the water onto land was the mycelium, was the fungus. And the fungus, they have to do the same things that we do. They eat, sleep, shit. And they breathe stuff in, they breathe in oxygen, breathe out carbon dioxide. They need the same things that we need. In fact, we need the same things that they need because they've been doing it a lot longer than us. And as they were moving around, AKA colonizing the planet, which I know is a loaded word, but mushrooms are the first colonizers, and they had to move around. And as they move around and weaved themselves within the fabric of the bedrock, which they had to break down and eat and pass through. And once mushrooms, the fungus, eats and passes through its system and digests the rock, it produces soil. So mushrooms are the soil creators. And then 500 million years later, plants and other things are coming out of the soil.
That doesn't sound like colonizing, because that sounds quite generous.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, because these words have been distorted. When they're loaded, these words are loaded now. So what the original terms are and what we use them for are different things now. And there's many words in life, like I like to play around with words. There's many words that are not what they used to be.
So what did colonizing used to mean?
So in cultivation, so mushroom cultivation, so for example, say we colonize a substrate, we colonize our grain spawn. So when mushrooms colonize a substrate, they take it over. They literally do, they take it over, they produce food for themselves, but produce food for other people, produce for other things. And those other things, it's not like I'm giving you what I want to give you, it gives you what they need. So these principles of how mushrooms colonize are different from how human colonize, how we're talking about human, because if we look at how bees colonize, how ants colonize, they all colonize, or we don't do it the way they do it. There's a lot we could learn through ants, bees, and mushrooms when it comes to colonizing. It's how humans do it that is messed up. So yeah, going back to it, these are principles that you learn through nature. And that's why these indigenous cultures who have done exactly the same thing over the years, done things in a very much more sustainable way than we do things now. But when it came to the mushrooms and their mission, whatever their mission is, we're still working out to this day, that they came from beyond, have come here, taken over this earth, and have used it as a substrate. The same way we mushroom colonize, anybody who knows about mushroom colonizing knows that once we inoculate the substrate, once we take the form of the mushroom into the grain, into the, into the straw, into the wood chip, we then want our mycelium to work its way through it, to take it over. It goes from a brown log to this white log. It goes from straw to this white straw. It zombifies, it cocoons the substrate. And then over that period of time, it transforms it. So then fruiting bodies, mushrooms can grow from it. Basically, that's what the mycelium has done to planet Earth. It has used the earth as a substrate, and things then fruit from the soil, from the earth, including us. We're an extension of this extraterrestrial alien mycelium project. So this is where I come from in, teaching and sharing that, we are mushrooms having a human experience. And I feel like many cultures have spoken about that. They've implemented it in their way of life. We have, from Africa to India, you've got like cow cults, cattle societies, that consider cattle sacred for different reasons. But one of the main reasons is because it provides the fertility for the planet. It provides shit, farmyard manure. Now, any gardener, anybody in horticulture knows how important that is. For me, it's the currency for the planet. Shit is the currency for the planet. It's what everything that is breaking down stuff is doing. So mushrooms are breaking down organic waste. It's providing its own waste. And then things become behind the mushroom waste and eat that waste. They pass it through and they produce waste. And that's how we get new soil. So it's all just like a big pile of waste, but not waste in the way that humans produce waste. It's organic waste, organic matter. And because all of these things are recycling naturally, we're the ones that are kind of out of the frame doing things slightly different. But those who know that cow waste is really important. It's the fertility, it's the currency, it's the money for the planet. So that's why they may consider these cattle sacred, not only for that purpose, that they provide meat, manure, milk, but they also provide mushrooms, all these M's, So the mushrooms grow on the cow dung. And these are some of the relationships or the societies, the agricultural societies that created the first religions are basing their societies on. And that's the later religions of getting it all from that. And it's kind of just been lifted and progressed forward, but we've lost the source information, the source codes of what it's all about. So for me, you're from India. You've mentioned you traveled to India. You realize that there's a whole different approach to our relationship with cattle and nature in general. And then you get things like permaculture, which is the new. It's not new, but it's like the new approach to sustainability and agriculture and stuff. And you're like, oh, this is not new. This is what this is what we've been doing in Africa. This is what we've been doing in India. Work with nature rather than against it. It's like, no, that's what we were doing. But when we were doing it, you were saying like, look at those primitive people. Look at how they, it's like, but now we're just catching up again with how we should be doing things because we've been creating another kind of waste that isn't sustainable and isn't done in a productive way that is replenishing Earth like indigenous cultures have been doing for millenniums.
I love it with the cows in India because, yes, in Indian culture, you take the milk and, butter and the dairy and all of that's part of the culture, but you don't eat them. And so they just wander. And even in cities, like in the city of Ahmedabad, which is the biggest city of Gujarat, there's just cows everywhere in the street. It's just, and you wait for them and they do their thing. And it's like the roads are like a dance with the cows, and the cows have importance and you let them be because there's a deep respect of what they're doing. That's right.
And that's for me, like people who know, and that's what I say to people, like, these are the true cowboys and cowgirls. The stuff we watched in the movies, that Hollywood stuff has distorted our whole perspective. Like these, and like you said, you go to India, and Africa, the same thing. It's like their currency as well. They, they're protected. They're not, although they're utilized, they're not used and abused. And it's like there's a difference in how we've seen, or at least I've seen it through the lens of being here in the West and looking at, how the farming is done now and, agriculture and how, and what are we eating? I call it computer food, man. I know that it's not even what we, and now that I've been calling it computer food for like 20 plus years to my children. And when I said, I want to grow our own food, we want to eat healthy, I said, all this other stuff is computer food. And we get to a point in time where you've got 3D printed food, because always you say these factories are computers. They're once you understand what it's like a computer and it prints food for you. And now we've got 3D printed food and 3D printed meat, or not even on a way, it's already here. So for me, these are just interesting times.
The retirement village where my mum lives, there's fields all around it and there's cows, and the noises that those cows make, I have never heard cows make that noise in India. And it's like, you can just feel that. That's in the mix. And it's so different because that is where we are. How can we transform where we are now to bring back that respect and that realness. And it doesn't mean you don't ever eat the cow. It doesn't have to mean that. It's just like this completely extractive way of being a part of nature.
Like, yeah, there's a lot to that, man. There's a lot to that. So I think like what's really important is everybody being ambassadors for what they know and where they're from, and like being honest about it. So we have to understand that like we're sick in this part of the world, man. It's just like sick. There's like it's embedded within the consciousness now. So just it's like all of our actions are based off this sickness, and it's like But if we can say, like, for example, you can say, like, oh, in India, like, our relationship with the cows and how we deal with it is like a lot different from what I'm seeing, I don't know, in the countryside here in the UK or in the Americas, in California somewhere. And I could be like, oh, yeah. And then if I go to Barbados with my family, if I'm the same thing, like, there's cows everywhere. And it's like, yeah, there's like, the relationship is slightly different. And we go back even further. We could say, oh, in Africa and the cow cults and, you know, in Eastern Africa, it's like, and then we go to the ancient world and we're like, oh, look how Lakshmi, look how you've got Hathor, Heteru, the cow goddesses and stuff like that. I'm just saying to say that we could go back and learn so much, but we dismiss all of that. It's like mumbo jumbo stuff and be like, that's how it's meant to be done. Like they were the gatekeepers. They are the cowboys and cowgirls. They're the ones who are meant to teach us. Until it's like, oh, you want a cow? It's like a pet. You know, if you shouldn't have somebody, if you want to take a pet cat or dog, you need to have somebody who's had a pet cat or dog to say, this is how you need to take care of it. You can't just be given a cat and be like, take care of it. You need someone who's been there, say like, oh, this is what you need to do. You need to do this. It needs to be fed this way. You can't feed it that. And I guess like a lot of times there's, not a lot of times, the reality of it is, I said this the other day at one of the gatherings, like sometimes it goes down well, sometimes it doesn't. But the reason why we're sick is because we've got children in charge of the house. It's like, there are parents who, for some reason or another, are not able to facilitate the household, you know, and the children are now in the household running a riot, running amok. The parents are not around, and there's some other brothers and sisters around. That's what I'll say to people, you know, like you as a big brother or big sister, and you've got a little brother or little sister running around, the parents are out and they're drawing on the walls, painting and stuff like, what are you going to do? Do you allow them to do it? Do you prevent them from doing it? Do you show them options and alternatives? Or do you wait for mum and dad to come back and give them, you know, tell them off? And the way that I say, like, that's how we should see the planet. Like, the reality of it, the West are like the youngest to have the baton, to have the consciousness of this planet. It's leading the way through all the mediums that are out there. And it's like, but there are older cultures, older traditions that you could learn a lot from. Your big brothers and sisters, you should be saying, hey, big bro, big sis, you've been here a while. How do you go about doing it? Because you could learn from your big brothers and sisters, but because those big brothers and sisters have been discriminated upon, you know, looked upon as how the West looks upon, there's a lack of respect for who they are and what they do and what they bring to the table. And I personally feel that's why the world is in the mess that it's currently in, man. Definitely. But with that said, big brother, big sister, parents, what are you going to do? You know, like, what do you do? How do you go about it? Do you let little brother, little sister just run around and cause a wreck in the house? Or do you say, hey, stop it? You know, stop it. Behave yourself. We don't need mama, because when mum and dad come back, they're not just going to tell you off. They're going to tell me off too for letting you do what you've been doing in the house. So I always use that metaphor for my students when they're blaming, you know, whatever it may be. And then I apply it to like a grander scheme of thing like planet Earth, man. Like, who are the guardians? Who are the parents? Who are the ones responsible for this? Like, we are, you know, and we've lost our place and space in this thing. I believe by my observation that the worms are doing all right. That, you know, as far as fulfilling their role, the ants, you know, the bees are, everything is, but we're the ones who are messing it up for everybody. Everything. We're messing it up for the bees, for the worms, for the ants, for other humans. It's like, come on. Because we're sick, we don't identify our illness. So it's no different from being an alcoholic, born into it, being born into addiction and not realizing why you're in this state. And you need somebody to say, hey, you know, like, you're addicted to sickness, you're sick, you're ill. But the sickness and the illness has become norm. And that's an asylum institution, man. That's what I feel we're living. And that's why we're seeing all the things happening on planet Earth currently based upon that lack of that self-diagnosis.
And then the cultural system that we're in says well, actually, you're sick. It's you need medication. You need this, you need that. And it becomes a whole thing where then somebody is like, like it's me. I'm the one that's the problem. There's nothing in that system that's like, well, hang on. If depression rates are rising at the rate that they are, and obesity and diseases, the Parkinson's and the dementias and the diabetes, like if all of that's happening, it's not the one person whose fault that is experiencing those things. It's way bigger than that.
Definitely.
And I know that's such an obvious thing to say, but I feel like when you're going through it, it does feel like it's your fault, like you did something wrong. And often when you go for support around these things, it will often be like, you did this, like
once
there's something wrong with you.
Once you awaken to that and you question that, it's like, who are you to be questioning this? Like, what are you talking about? Then when you actually activate that side of yourself, like I was saying, man, you might end up getting sectioned or getting arrested, or like you're, a problem to society, and that's like the sickness that we're in. And what's crazy about, is had this workshop and we brought up stats and figures. So everything from, because it was all to do with wellness. So physical and mental wellness. And what we discovered through all the stats and data that's out there by the powers that be, what they provide us with to say, hey, we've been evaluating this stuff. And we can go from mental health challenges all the way to the physical health challenges are all based on modern society. Like there was the article that was saying there are mothers in the here and now that are prepared to break the law and take Class A drugs, aka psilocybin and psychedelics, because of the stresses of modern day life. And I'm like, isn't modern day life meant to be isn't that not meant to be the thing that like, no, that's the cause, that's the stress that is messing it with. And the same with the health. It's just like it's the modern diets that it's like, oh, so all the things that we've been running towards, that is like the thing, wow, all the colors and the lights and that's the thing that's killing you. You need to go back. And that's why I highlighted, Sankofa. It's a principle that you find primarily in like Western Africa amongst the Akan, and others it's like an Ndinka symbol, but the symbols have meanings, and the symbol is a bird moving forward but looking back to its tail, and the principle is basically like knowing where you come from to know where you're going, and to bring with you what may be considered taboo, what you've left behind, what you've forgotten. And for me, that's just like where, like, until if we want to become healthy, there's some stuff that we've lost, there's some stuff that we've forgotten. And that's the key to us becoming healthy. And the big brothers, the big sisters, and, need to become healthy and conscious of their roles. And all the cow keepers and the cowboys and cowgirls need to tell the new cowboys and cowgirls that you're doing it wrong. You've been, and pull their card and say, yeah, this is, and that's what we're seeing is happening on the planet. And it's going to be an interesting times as we've been experiencing, and it's going to not be easy. It's going to definitely be challenging. It's going to ruffle the little brothers and sisters' feathers because they believe they're the ones and the way we're doing it is the best way. But we've seen evidently that there's not. And to humble yourself, and say, do you know what? We're going to have to go and listen to those people in India. We're going to have to listen to those people in Africa. We're going to have to listen to those people in Asia who've been working with cows and been doing it. And when the cows see them, they don't have those screams. Why don't your cows scream like our cows? There's a lot you could learn, man. Here we go. And it's like, yeah, it's those dialogues, man. It's those communications and connections that if we start functioning like mushrooms, we can do. And that's why I always say you need to bring mushrooms into your meeting, man. You got to bring them into your conversation, into your dialogue, and that's when the world will be, like a better place.
Thank you for listening. If you are enjoying this episode, please do get more involved. You can do this by joining our membership, Presence Collective, where we explore deeper how to create beauty in the mess. And you can find details of our experiences such as Reclaim Your Intuition, beautiful leadership mentoring, and our in-person retreats. By joining in and being an active member of this community, you support the making of this show, keeping the episodes full length, free and accessible for all. so we can stay advertising free in a world that is always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. Other ways that you can connect into the ecosystem is by sharing these episodes with those in your life and dropping us a note from time to time. Head to allthatweare.org to get involved.
We're in this time, I know that in the West it's been called the psychedelic renaissance, and I know your views on that. That's a very Western-centric view on something that was never lost from so many cultures. Now, if I am a human having a mushroom experience, then I am taking my lion's mane and my cordyceps and my reishis and maybe my magic, and I'm doing it so that I can have a better immunity, and I can be more creative, and I can be more productive, and I can be more connected. If I'm a mushroom having a human experience, what do the mushrooms want me to understand?
Well, that's what we're all out here trying to work out, because, it's like how it's connected to everything. So, in horticulture, I learned this, or I heard this a lot when I was studying, and it's like, as gardeners, we're out here, propagating plants, and just making plants do what they do. And then there was a saying that I heard many times, it's like, are we using the plants or are the plants using us? Because plants have evolved to look a certain way, taste a certain way, and they use us to get them from point A to point B. Then when you realize that the mushrooms and the mycelium network is in control of all the plants and giving them all what they need, then the question is, what are the mushrooms up to? What are their agenda? And Kalindi would always say, I have to big up Kalindi E, my teacher, inspiration, on the mushroom path. He'd always say, although when you take your mushrooms, you have your intentions and your agenda, just know that the mushrooms have an agenda too. And sometimes when you eat your 3, 5, 7, 10 grams, whatever it may be, that you might have said, today I'm taking mushrooms to sort this out, and the mushroom's going to pull you into a whole nother reality, another experience. And for me, that's like the learning experience. Like, what is the agenda? Well, it's like any living and breathing organism, which mushrooms are. You should ask it and find out, like, what is your agenda? How do you know what someone else's agenda is? I can do from observing. I can observe my children. Like I've seen so this is what they like to do. This is what they like to do. Me having a hands-off observation perspective. Or I can say, oh, child, let me show you this. Let me teach you this, and have an influence on them and see what that looks like. And I think I approach it the same with mushrooms. In my relationship with mushrooms, it's like, it's a living and breathing organism. So when I sit with my mushrooms, I'm like, what are you up to? What are you trying to get out of this? So some of the things that I have received in my downloads is that they want to have a human experience. They want to be in a human body, being a fruiting body that can move around, because we're a fruiting body that can move around, touch things, feel things, digest things, smell things. Things like, I want to be in your body for 8 hours and experience what you experience, because I'm just going to go back to being the mycelium network, laying in the soil, and I've got the opportunity to pop up. I refer to us as like the computers, the organic computers, and the mushrooms being like USB data keys. That's holding the data and information. It's like, I can insert and get into your hard drive and into your motherboard and into your circuit and experience all of those things too. And that's what the exchange is about on a metaphysical, physical level. But when you bring it down, it's like, well, what are the mushrooms' agenda? For me, I've got an earthly agenda, and there's like a cosmic agenda that I have in my own personal experiences when it comes to the mushrooms. And I guess everybody has their experience or their relationship with mushrooms, which is unique to them. So now I would say, like, what are the mushrooms telling you? And that's what their agenda is, and that's what they're going to use you for. And you've obviously got reasons why you want to use the mushrooms, and hopefully you do it in a symbiotic relationship way where you both get something from it. Because in the here and now, there are a lot of people pimping mushrooms, and I say, it's like, has the mushrooms co-signed what you would like to use them for? I always meet people who's like, I want to set up a mushroom farm. They've never grown a mushroom before. And it's like, they just got plans of what they want to do with mushrooms. I was like, you should get to build a relationship with them and find out what their agenda is, what they like. What food do mushrooms like to eat? What mushrooms do you want to grow? What do they like to eat? And that's how you work out what their agenda is, what they like. And then you start to build that relationship and that rapport. And however that information is, you receive it. Could be through, the taking of magic mushrooms, and or just getting you to a place through taking your lion's mane, through taking your functional and adaptogenic mushrooms that are making you a better version of yourself, a healthier version of yourself, becoming more conscious of your role on the planet. So you can just be like the ants, just like the worms, just like the bees, and playing your role. We're all role players out here, so just play your role. And that's what I think these things are definitely helping us do, to play our role.
And to be connected back into the ecosystem that's coming from the soil.
We have no choice but to do that. And if we continue to do it the way that we're doing it, history has shown us, at least what science has suggested, when we look at history as well, what happens? We'll just get removed off the planet like all the other organisms that had fulfilled their role. It's like, okay, you're not contributing where you know where you be, and or there's a crisis, there's an impact or a crisis that just ushers us off the planet. And what I've discovered so far is that the planet does all right. It doesn't need us. The planet didn't need the dinosaurs. The planet didn't need for it to keep going. It's like, so you can come and you go, and the planet, this organism still does its thing. Even if all of the soil gets depleted, it's like, here we go again. It would just like have to start all over again. And it's like, it's been there. I always reference George Carlin, the comedian. And he's got this snippet that you can find on YouTube. It's like if you just put his name in, George Carlin, and like save the planet. And it's like, he does it in such a humorous way, but it's like, it hits home. And he's just like, the arrogance of humans to think that we're going to save the planet. We're here to save the planet. It's like, we've really put ourselves up here as the species that's here to save the planet. It's like, with all the species that have ever come and been a part of this experience, why do you think we're the pinnacle of all of these species? And why do we think that what we contribute, although we are increasing a lot of destruction to the planet, that is any more destructive than a meteorite impact? Within this whole framework of his comedies, like basically like, know your role, know your place in the grand scheme of things. Like, we're not that important, we're just an aspect. And like in the, how many is it? The billions, trillions of years in some traditions that this organism has been becoming, because it's not static. It's become something and continues to become something. And we're part of its becoming. And it's just like knowing our place and space in it. And once you do, it's like, just be like, just a cool citizen, man. Just like know your role, man. Know your place in this thing. Like you're not the best, you're not the worst. It's like, you're not in that thing, but it's like, just know your place in the grand scheme of things. And I think that's when it humbles your role. It's like, I'm connected to the bees, to the slugs, to the snails. Why am I putting slug killers down? I don't want them to eat my kale. I'm growing kale, don't eat my kale. So then you get the principles, grow in threes. That's what we're taught. You grow in three. You grow for you, definitely grow for you, because that's what it's about. It's all about you. But you got to grow for the slugs and the snails, the pests, the so-called pests who have been here a lot longer than us, that have been eating the kale and eating the plants. And then you got to grow for your neighbors too, because they're going to look over the fence and they'll be like, hey, those kales, those pumpkins look nice. And you can't be like, nah, it's all for me. You'll be like, here's your slugs and snails, you got some. And here, neighbor, you can take a pumpkin too. This is the ecosystem. This is that beyond just you. But yeah, these are the principles that I learned from mushrooms. And I think that's what it reminds me. Although I'm out here struggling as well, just like everybody else, trying to be that version of myself, trying to be that, but like, I'm always reminded. What about yourself? What are the mushrooms telling you? What's their agenda is?
It also just changing that framework from like me into us. Like even when I ask that question, it's like when we're doing anything from that human, it's all about us. It's like we're so selfish. Like, and we're so individual, and we're so like trying to just like get something all the time. And we're not actually like that. And so I feel like when that softens in any human, and like for me, when that softened in me, that was like, it was such a beautiful relief to not always be trying to get something. And even like with spiritual experiences as well, that needing to be like my experience, and actually coming into a place where it's like an experience that connects me deeper into like a multitude of experiences. And I feel like that's something that me being a mushroom, having a human experience has led me to understand deeper. And yeah, I mean, I guess there's all kinds of ways, big and small, where it's like changing things up in the way that we do things, and bringing just a different consciousness into like understanding the impact of things and where things go. And also that quality of like earthiness that's so different from like syntheticness. And it's hard to explain until you've really felt it.
For sure, for sure. And yeah, we've become so far removed in the synthetic world, you know. Everybody's there, virtual reality, AI just takes us away from touching and feeling and tasting, you know, reality, for how it was designed for us to experience. And I think that's what we're, you know, I think the planet is urging us to reconnect with that truth. Even with the challenges that we see and we witness, I think that it's just all a reflection of what we need. And sometimes Earth experience is just that you need to, it goes through these episodes, you know, to have to, it's like, you know, different traditions, you know, they talk about the Kali Yuga, the, you know, in the indigenous America traditions, they talk about, in Africa, they talk about, in the Bible, they talk about, you know, the apocalypse, this shift in these changes, we're in these days and times, and it's cycles. It's like a cycle. So that means it's happened before, it's going to happen again. And if it's happened before, it's going to happen again, and you're aware of that. So what do you do about it this time? You know, if you know this is what's coming, how do you manage? How do you facilitate it this time? And you know that that's where we're at. And I think that's what's really important in that recycling, that reconnecting. And that's what I'm saying. Recycling is a mushroom principle, man. Mushrooms are nature's recyclers, you know, and there's a lot that we can learn. So to jump around a little bit, but when I look at the mushrooms and look at what do I learn from them, what do they teach me? Like, there's different types of mushrooms, you know. I said there's like ones that do have this very passionate relationship with nature. You know, for example, like the mycorrhizal fungi, you know, the fungi that's in the soil, that's connecting all of the different plants and organisms together and making sure that everything is getting what it needs. And you've got the saprophytic fungi, those are the ones that are, you know, just taking, you know, waiting for things to die. And like they're cleaning up, they're like the cleanup boys. And then you've got like the cordyceps mushroom, the zombie ant mushrooms, you know, that are taking over the minds of different, there's different types of mushrooms. And, you know, I refer to some of them like as the regulators, the Warren G and Nate dogs. That's what I see. They're like Warren G and Nate dogs. They're like the hitmen of the fungi. Like, they're not all nice. They're not all good. They're not all, you know, like some of them say, hey, you guys, because that's what they do. They're like balancing things out. So when there's a particular species that is doing too much in the forests, you know, it's like, the fungi find them to like take them out, to regulate the numbers, to keep things in balance and check. And I'm like, it's just interesting how they all function. It's like, so what kind of mushroom am I? You know, there's all this, like, or at least today, how am I operating and functioning today? Am I fluid and flowing and changing and exchanging, or am I just bang, 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 taking them out? And then it always makes me think, you know, is there a species on planet Earth that's doing way too much, that needs some regulating, that needs some checking in? And, you know, and I'm like, yeah, I'm privy to one at least. Yeah, and you know, the mushroom's gonna do what they do. You know, if you're from organic matter, you're living and breathing. If you acknowledge that, just know that mushrooms are coming for you. They've been coming for you. They are the beginning. They are the creators. They are the sustainers, and they are the destroyers. And they are the ones who then generate and regenerate. And, you know, and one day down the line, they're going to take you out, man. You know, like whether you know it or not, like it or not, or accept it or not. And they could do it individually or they could do it collectively. Like, this is what I'm aware of. So I'm humble enough to just want to play my part. So when they come back, I can be like, yeah, you're going to be part of the flowing crew. And they're not going to like just send out the hitmen for me when it comes to the mushrooms coming back and saying, you know, who do we keep and who do we get rid of?
There's something quite interesting in just the mushrooms that are super poisonous can look the same as ones that are magic, as ones that are nourishing, and keeps you on your toes.
Yeah. That's why I like education. They're the educators. They're the teachers. We call them teacher plants or teacher fungi. They're the teachers. And those were the lessons. Those are the first lessons, especially when you live in real life, not concrete jungles in nature. Those are the first lessons you got to learn as a child. Because what do children do?
Put everything in their mouths.
So the first thing you need to learn is what not to put in your mouth. And when you live out in nature in real life, and it's all these things from the dirt, the soil, the bugs, you've got to learn. That's why that education, these were rites of passages, man. They're like, it's so important. And these are the first things you would have been learning and taught, man. And that's why in the educational space where I was like getting into horticulture and teaching horticulture, I saw that was a win. Like, I'd done football before, I'd done creative arts, music projects, filmmaking projects, but I was working with these hard, so-called rude boys and gangsters and stuff. But when I took them to Epping Forest, it just opened up their their childlikeness. Like, oh, there's a worm, there's a butterfly. What is this? It's like, so it opened that side, and it's the education. I realized, yeah, we didn't get this. Like, this was and is so important to humanity, and we've been disconnected from that. And like, we just look in menus now, and we're told like how the food is, but like, oh, we missed out on that. And that's what, like you said, would allow us to be like, don't touch this. This is good for this is good for that, and no matter what, you've fallen over, we've got one for that. You know, you've got a headache, we've got one for that. Yeah. And I'm learning that now in adulthood. I'm just about learning that in adulthood, when I know we should have been learning that as children, because there are some mushrooms, there are some plants that are deadly and toxic, and you need to know what they look like, because they look like the same things that you eat that are okay. And you know, and I say that to say as well, you know, there are as we are aware, there's more deadly and toxic plants out there that we've identified than mushrooms, but we don't have that fear around plants that we do around mushrooms. And it comes back to the point, because we're educated a bit more about plants, and that's the gap. It's like mushrooms, there's still a taboo, there's still got to be careful with mushrooms. So with that, that's why it's really important to educate and be like, yeah, there are some deadly and poisonous and toxic mushrooms, but if you know which ones they are, you don't need to worry, because you know which ones they are, and you avoid those ones. And then you can tell the little 2-year-old, hey, no. And then they're going to look at you like, no, okay. They learn from them.
It's a big no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had an initiation from a foxglove plant that was physical. I didn't ingest it. I knew not to, but I did touch it, and it, for whatever reason, whether it was also a relational exchange that me and this plant were having. And so it had strong physical symptoms for about 5 weeks, but I felt like a complete cleansing of my heart. And I don't recommend this, because unless you know what you're doing, I wouldn't just go out and touch foxgloves. Like, I do know that the foxglove is and that must be from childhood, like that they were there, and like don't go to them. But somehow this happened. And that's also the thing, is once we come into these relationships, like, we start to dance, and the plants do want to relate with us, and they do want to bring their medicine through us, and they want to show us things that enable us to be a more connected part of this ecosystem. That is an initiation, and it's not something to be taken lightly. And that respect that we have to bring into our relationship with mushrooms and plants, and especially if there's a psychoactive, poisonous aspect to it, that it's also, it's got to be done with that respect and then that trust. And when it's not, it can go in like other directions, which are pretty rough to handle, and can also get you sectioned.
And that's why it's important that we would have rites of passages and elders who can pass that knowledge and information on, and it enables one to like know what you're doing it in the right safe setting, as we use those terms now, you know, like, and that for me, that's just really key. And it's like, you're not just finding this out for the first time on a Friday night when your friend says, hey, I've got a bag of stuff, stick your hands in and take, you know, doing what children do, like, let me just eat. And then you don't know what you're putting in your system, how it's going to impact you. And like, that is our rites of passage that we have in the UK, for example. That is,
you're at a sketchy warehouse party.
Take 2 of these. Like, what is it? Don't worry, just take it. And you might have a great night. And I'm not saying you're not, but the point being, tying it in with, like you said, that dance, that tango. That's what I told you. That relationship. It's really important, and that's one thing that I've definitely got from observing what the plants and fungi inspire me to do personally. You know, and I've seen culturally it inspires a lot of people to do. Why it does relate to what takes place at these festivals in a warehouse on a Friday night, and also corresponds what happens in indigenous cultures on a equinox, on a full moon, with the dance around the fire. You know, it's invoking all of those principles. So it's like going back to, like, there's memories. So that's like a foxglove, like, oh yeah, there's a memory in you that knows. And that's why it's like, yo, let's take these mushrooms, let's go to the forest and start a fire. Let's just bring some drums and stuff in it, like whatever. Bring your tool, bring your stuff with you. It's like, yeah, because that's what we've been doing for millenniums. That's what we've been doing, just in different shapes and forms. And now it's a DJ who's got his decks out, but the decks are the drums, it's like, and it's like, yeah, and that's what it's like. It's dancing. There's a lot, as we know, there's healing and a lot of downloading and channeling and possession and stuff like that happens in the dance, in the trance dance. This is what it's all about. And now they've got the trance music for you to have these trance dances and get into these altered states of consciousness to do the healing work, to get the lessons, to get the knowledge, by way of whatever it is that you're ingesting.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been working with a vibrational essence of the foxglove for about 1.5 years before this happened. And I asked the foxglove if I could take it as an offering into the ceremony. The foxglove said, yeah. And then it's like, well, I have to let go of what that then looks like. And, it was a ceremony that wasn't with like any kind of plants, apart from I was holding a foxglove as an offering to the altar. And then you have to surrender and be like, okay, this is like a 5-week journey, and it's going to bring up all of this, and it's going to move all of this, and it's going to show me all of this. And to not then catastrophize that, and to be able to be with it. But it's difficult when you don't have the right people around you.
Yeah, man.
And I'm lucky to know some of the right people to call.
That's good.
But also to be able to have that trust from coming into this like deeper relationship with what it is to be a part of nature. And I loved that when I saw Satish Kumar do a talk recently, who's been on the podcast, and somebody did that, what can I do? And he was like, if you're not married, marry a gardener. If you are married, become a gardener.
Okay. Yeah.
And actually, there's so much, and I'm really young on my journey of actually understanding like how to grow things.
Because it's cultivating, man. And once you learn how to, I've learned this with my young students. Perfect example being, I've got young people, normally when they come into the classroom, they're the hard to reach communities, that's what they refer to, but they're not into gardening. So when they're coming like, this, I'm not interested, I don't want to grow, I want to play on my PlayStation, I want to be on my phone. And then all it takes, I've learned 2 skill sets working with those groups in particular. So one is I've got to engage them through enterprise and stuff, because they want to make money, they want to, that type of stuff. But the other thing that I think is just amazing is when I'll be like, the first session, no matter whether they're 5-year-olds or 15-year-olds that I'm working with, the first thing I get them to do is sow a seed. Sow a seed. With the 5-year-olds, I tell them, who wants to be a gardener? And they're like, yeah, I want to be a gardener. Because I'm like, yeah, because you're going to be the guardians of the planet. That's what a gardener is. You're the guardians of the planet. And you're going to have a very important role. If I say that to the 15, 16-year-olds who wants to be a gardener, like, no, sir, you're a gardener because you failed in life. Like, it's a total 2 different extremes. But regardless of what response I get them to sow the same seeds. And then by the first week or following week, the second week, when their seeds have started to germinate and they see that little seedling coming out of the soil, out of the pot, out of the compost, they're like, wow, look at my plant. They start getting excited. And once they start seeing the first true leaves set, and further down the line, it bearing its first fruit, you see that journey of them cultivating the plant, growing the plant, they're actually growing. Like, it's this relationship. And like, I don't have to tell them that, but they get it by week 4, week 5, when they're proud of their, I was like, do you remember week 1? Do you remember week 1 when you couldn't be bothered, you couldn't be asked, and look at all your plants and how excited you are about it. Look how much you've grown, through growing this, look how much you've grown. And that's the relationship that a gardener has with this planet. Like, they are important, man. Gardeners are the guardians of the planet, and that's why I'm proud to be a gardener, and many others that are on that path. And you can garden many things. It's not literally just having to be in a garden with the plants per se, but there's many things that we need to garden. Hairdressers are gardeners. There's principles and metaphors. It's like, yeah, the people who take care and nurture, like, they're really important. So yeah, for me, that's like a message again that I get from the mushrooms, and how I utilize those principles in other areas to engage the future generations that will be the future gardeners and guardians of the planet, for sure.
And there's something to reframe there that really like comes to me as you're talking. In Indian culture, for example, like, the darker your skin is because you have to be outside in the heat, and we have the whole history of colonization and black slaves on the land, and gardening being this, like, it's the nice people with the nice house, and then there's the gardener that comes and does the gardening. So you want to aspire to be the nice person in the house that sits around drinking a gin and tonic in the afternoon, not the one that's out there doing the work. And this whole thing needs to be shifted, because actually, as the food becomes more and more computer, then having that relationship with the soil and that ability to create becomes like worth so much more.
For sure.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, for sure, man, because that's actually how I got onto what I do now. It was actually my very first experience in Barbados, and being inspired by one of the youngest family members at that time. It would have been about 4 or 5 years old maximum, who knew the land, and he took me to his land. I'm like, bro, you're 3, 4 years old. What do you mean you got land? Because he grows food. I'm like, you're 5. What do you mean you grow food? You got land? What do you talk? Like, I'm in my 30s at the time. Like, I don't know about growing food. What do you know about growing food? He took me to his land, and it was no bigger than like, 2 square meters, but like growing food, knew how to do it. And I realized that everybody in my family and the wider community knew something about the land, knew something about the soil, and just how important it was. And just through that relearning, restudy myself, I realized how important the garden is, because it's the same thing. The younger generation there in Barbados to this day, then I go back, they just want to come here to the UK. They want to come to America.
Do data entry.
Yeah.
Well, they don't know. Like, it's just the
and I'm like, I'm coming back to Barbados to do some gardening. And they've got the same mentality. Yo, this is like common people stuff, is all byproducts of slavery. So people don't want to be associated with that. Then I always flip it on people. I'm like, do you know when your birthday is? I'm like, yeah, of course I know when my birthday is. Like, do you know when this is, when that is? And people are like, wow, what do you mean? Because the people who enabled you to know when your birthday is are the gardeners. It's because of gardeners that we know when things happen in the heavens, when it's the full moon, when to observe, when the waters are coming in, when the waters are low, and all these things. We had to observe those things to work out how to survive and sustain ourselves. And that's why we know I'm an Aries, I'm born in this day. And we know the things is like, because these were the agricultural societies that later become religions, that later become the industries that we all believe in now. And all of them are dependent upon gardeners. I don't care whether it's McDonald's, Nike, the technological phones, they're all going back to soil. The diamonds, the crystals, all in the soil. The food coming from the soil that the cows eat. You need to know about gardening, bro.
£20 note. Soil.
Yeah. So with the young students, I teach them gardeners, you're the guardians. And the older students, because they don't want to do gardening, they think it's boring. I'm like, the workshop's titled Money Grows on Trees. So they come in the class like, I'm like, yeah, money grows on trees. What do you mean? I'm like, literally, money grows on trees. Just like you're a mushroom having a human experience. Like, nah. And I break it down. Just like, all right, obviously we know, well, money used to be made from paper, but the paper came from the plants and all the rest of it. But I give them the concept of, when we grow plants, for example, salads, we got our salad crops and we harvest the crops. Like, you can just harvest the whole plant and you could sell the plant. So I'll give this whole thing like this, 50 seeds. Let's say that in a pack of seeds, there's 50 seeds in there. I could, plant each individual seed and get 50 plants. And I can take all of those 50 plants and go sell them down the market. And I could sell them all for £1 each. I could buy that pack of seeds for £1, yeah. And I could grow 50 plants and make £50 from one pack of seeds for £1. I said, that's good business there, But at the same time, I can not harvest all of those plants at one time. There's a technique that I teach them, and you may know if you're in the garden, if you're a gardener, you would know about cut and come again, where you can harvest some of the leaves of the plant, and a few days later, more leaves grow. And I can take those leaves I've harvested, and I can put them in a bag, and I can sell that. It's called a salad bag. And that salad bag is worth more than that £1 plant I've harvested, the whole plant. I can just take a few of those leaves and put it in, and I can sell that salad bag for about £2. Now that can go out there. And then I can come back again, get some more leaves. I can take those same leaves and put them in a box. And I can get some vinaigrette and I can sprinkle some vinaigrette on them same leaves, that same plant that cost me £1 for a pack of seeds. And now that box is now £5, the salad box, And I show them from that £1 seeds, so it's 50 plants, what I could generate from that, because that's why money grows on trees. And they're like, yeah, so these are some of the things that I engage them and get their attention as to. But before you get that 50, because we'll go them from that £1 to £50, but we can actually be generating about £500 in a very short space of time from that £1. You need to know what's going on in the soil, son. You need to know about these seeds, what germination, and then we can get that money. You're willing to do this journey with me? And they do. They come back and say, all right, I'm willing to learn about this soil and the seeds, and that, because we're going to get £500 in a few weeks. But we can't get £500 without knowing all of this. Let's do it. And they do it. And that's like thinking of it. So that, for me, that's like what's really important in the here and now, and knowing that, no, this is not because of colonialism, because of slavery. We was doing this before all of that. This is important. Like, do you eat food? Okay, somebody needs to know this stuff. Because if we lose it, I keep telling my young students, if we lose this, it's a wrap. It's a wrap, mate. It's over. I keep telling them, I'm all right. I'm an adult. I've served quite a bit of time here now. I says, but do you want to grow up? Do you want to have children? Do you want to have children who experience all this? Then you need to know how to feed the soil. It's like really important that you guys know how to feed the soil. And the young students are like, yeah, the 5, 6-year-olds, yeah, I'm gonna be a guardian of the future. The other students, the older ones, are like, nah, I'm all right, because we got Popeyes, we got KFC, we're going to Mars, sir. There's attitude, like they're so smart. I love it. But it creates amazing conversations as to why it's important for us to like sow those seeds early rather than when it's too late. Because as they get 15, 16, just like I was more interested in football, girls, music, partying. But if I was like reminded how important that is, I would have kept those connections and stored it on my hard drive, so then later on I could implement and use it. And like, yeah, the world wouldn't be where it's at right now if we empowered gardening as the guardians.
Well, they say, don't they, that most people can identify more logos than they can plants.
Yeah.
And my nieces at the ages of like 4 or 5 could tell you what every plant is and even what it's for. Like, oh yeah, you can, if you got a headache, you could have that one. And like, they know all of that. And I don't. So I'm like, what? It's like, how do you know? Like, this is amazing. Oh, it's so boring. Come on, like, let's do something else. And I'm like, tell me about the plants.
Yeah. That's how I got the bug in Barbados from my nephew at the time. I was like, bro, how do you know all of this? And it was the norm. It's like, what do you mean, how do I know? It's like, this is what we know. Then I remember speaking to the guy, and the guy goes, yeah, we're in the boats tonight going to St. Vincent. Like, what boats? He's got these little rowing boats. I'm like, where's St. Vincent? That's like another island. It's like, yeah, it's like a couple hours it's going to take to get. I'm like, bro, like, how are you getting here? He goes, yeah, we follow the stars. He was like an 18-year-old. I was like, do you know the 18-year-olds that I work with in London? If I told them to get from point A to point B, even with a map, GPS, they're going to have problems, man. And you're about to get in a boat in this endless stream of water, I see, and you're going to get to another island. I was blown by it. And then I realized just how little I know, man. And now I've been robbed and mugged off for being in this part of the world, in this so-called education. They're not really being educated about anything. I know logos.
Yeah.
I know logos.
There's so many that you've already shared, but if you want to end with a call to action, and there can be 2, there could be like a kind of inner one as well as something with your hands. What would you like to share?
There's a few things I could share. So a very practical one, like I always remind folks, is like, as a teacher, everybody's got something to teach, and you've got to learn, you're going to teach and share something. Like, let's teach the young ones, innit? I don't care whether you've got children or not, you've got nieces, nephews, somewhere down the line, you know children, you see children, like, give them some time. Children, people of colour, I like mushrooms more than anything else. What do I mean by that? They just often get stepped over and looked over. Like, people, oh, it's just mushrooms, like, and even just mushrooms, just like, you just walk, you step over the fungal kingdom so much, and it just gets ignored, because I'm just looking for that apple in the tree, the forbidden fruit. I'm just after this thing, and you miss so much by not investing in those smaller things there that, like, we're just like being looked over.
Some people even think mushrooms are gross.
I know. So that's the inspiration of my call to action, because I'm in Barbados. As you know, I'm going to Barbados. In Barbados, in the Caribbean as a whole, mushrooms are considered duppy umbrella. That's one of the terms that they refer to them as. So duppy being spirits or ghosts. This is where the ghosts and spirits hang out, and it's a taboo, it's negative. And just the general consensus is mushrooms grow on dead things. They can't be good for you. They grow on dead things. That's it. Like, that's where the education is at. So I'm like, so they get looked over, they get stepped over, they get, and I'm like, oh, they're like people of colour, they're like the young people, man. They're like the ones who get stepped over, like just dismissed. And it's like, no, please invest. invest some time, some effort, some energy, learn how to forage, do some outreach, learn how to forage. No matter who you are, there's a lot of people out there with a lot of knowledge and information. There's a lot of people out there with a lot of money, a lot of people with a lot of things, and they just are foraging in the wrong places, man. It's going to the wrong places, the wrong people. It's staying in certain circles. So like, just take the time out to do that. And a practical thing that I always tell people to do is like, do you eat food? And if you eat food, then you need to gift back. And when people say, what do you mean by gifting back? If you eat food, you would know, if you eat real food, not computer food, if you're eating real food, let's say you eat plants, those plants get the nutrients from the soil. All those nutrients are in the soil. And then the plants get those nutrients and the plants grow. And then you eat the plants and you get all the nutrients and then you grow. And like life has taught me and us that recycling everything, once it produces it and grows, it produces its waste and it goes back into the soil. So when we eat and we use all of those nutrients, we've got some waste. And for some reason or another, as smart human beings that have advanced all the way that we've advanced to, we end up putting our waste in a toilet. That's how far we've evolved. And really and truly, it needs to go back to where it came from. And when the people who do what you're meant to do, they're considered primitive, backwards, and because they just got a hole in the back of the pit. But when you put your gift back to where it comes from, that place becomes fertile for new life to grow. So it's just understanding and realizing there's some real simple practical things we could be doing that enable us to give back, where we've taken it from. And at the same time, realizing where we are in the grand scheme of things, like we're part of this cycle, we're part of this organism. So if I know that I'm a mushroom having a human experience and that the mushroom is holding all of this organism together, which Darren has highlighted, is just a big piece of shit. It's just all of the waste come together and the mycelium holds it and hugs it and embraces it. And she gives it a nice embracing hug to keep it all there. And if she was to ever relinquish her hug or embrace it, all turn to diarrhea. It really would. And then you would realize that you're just a big piece of shit. And that's how we're moving and acting, but it's not a negative thing. You just got to be the currency, the fertility that shit truly is, rather than be the pieces of shit that we currently are being on planet Earth. So role play the proper pieces of shit, role play the mushrooms, get back to your true self before the true OG mushroom come back and turn us into compost, because they're able to do that like that with no problem whatsoever. So yeah, that's like my call to action.
Amazing. It reminds me that a friend of mine, her daughter, who was also a friend who's amazing, she just said, I can't do this anymore. And she asked her boyfriend to build her a compost toilet in the garden. It's like, I just can't. Yeah. Like, I need to be in that reciprocal relationship.
So at least once in your life, you don't have to get the compost loo. You can't even, but at least once in your life, go dig that hole and give back.
Yeah.
And be like, of all the food, all the nutrients you provided me with, I'm going to give you something back directly. There you go. There it is. Deliver. Uber Eats.
And the thing that you said about, mushrooms growing off dead things, I just have to say, like, we underestimate so much the power of what comes through the underworld and our time in the underworld, and how much of the beauty and the light and the wisdom and the information that we need comes from us being brave enough to take that journey. The mushrooms do it.
Yeah, man, they do it a lot more too, man. That I'm learning is like, wow, like the metaphors. I could be here all day with you doing this, but just because as we know, the mushrooms and the shit have got a symbiotic relationship. They go together. Like mushrooms, we are mushrooms and we are shit. It's part of who we are, like the physical makeup of us, and the inners of us, as well as the external, the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth technology that we have access to, the wireless network. It's all part of our makeup, and that relationship between mushroom and shit is divine. It's divine. And when people say, yeah, you say this stuff, it sounds weird, and sometimes, and you're just calling me a big piece of shit, and I'm like, well, shit is divine. Shit is a deity. There's cultures, I can assure you, that you could go and do your research. I would encourage you to do your research and find out how they embrace shit. They cover themselves in it. They digest it in some cultures because they understand the value of it. Because just like when I was in Barbados, I was like, oh, they're barefoot and they're walking in the grass. There's all like goat shit and cow shit. And they're like, oh, they're just eating straw. they're just eating grass. That's all just chewed up grass. Like, they understand what it is. It's like, it's not McDonald's, mate. It's not Popeye's chicken and all of that. This is all it is. Like, oh yeah, it's all put into perspective. And then you realize that in the mythology it's there, because they talk about in ancient Egypt, you got the Lord of the Underworld, who's birthed by the great mother. The mother produces a child, and the child comes from the underworld and rises and becomes, in religion we call him the Christ, becomes the figure. You see these stories in mythologies all around the world, and like, it's all to do with mushrooms. The great mother is the mycelium network. She produces the child, the fruiting body, the mushroom, that rises, spends a few days out there and dies and resurrects and goes back in to regenerate itself. And you can get that, and then you find that, this is where you find within the mythologies and the traditions of Africa, even in India, in the Hinduism. I mean, I'm into mythology, so I'm drifting, but to put it, like the Trimurti, you've got, the creator, Brahma, the creator, you've got the sustainer, Vishnu, the destroyer, Shiva. It's like principles. And if we get these principles that have been laid out, it's kind of like ABC. That's why it was told in oral traditions, like Little Red Riding Hood, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Like, I couldn't tell you the last time I read Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but I haven't forgotten it. I know what the principles are. And if we were to teach the principles of the nature stories that we originally got, we would be good gardeners and guardians of the planet, man. That's like what I've learned. Anyway.
Amazing.
I could do this. But no, this has been a really good conversation this year, because as we spoke before, it's like many times just like interviews, just here's the 10 questions, here we go. And we can like actually build off each other and like just share some of that wisdom beyond the surface as well. Go deep into the abyss.
Yeah, it's been fun to be a mushroom with you.
Nice, it's a pleasure.
Darren, how would you like people to connect with you? And we share the links to everything, but it's nice for people just to hear it from you.
Cool, man. Well, website, darrenlebaron.com. You can go to the website. Everything gives you access from there. And if you at Darren Le Baron at any of your platforms, you'll be able to find me. I'm going to be this guy with mushrooms growing out of my head.
Amazing.
Like, follow, subscribe.
And there's just one thing that is just there still in my brain, is like, when we say to someone like, you're a piece of shit, it's like trying to say that they're worthless. And when we understand like the inherent worth in everything, especially our shit, then we realize that there's no such thing as worthlessness. Like, that's a human concept.
Yo, so you inspire me. I know we're meant to be wrapping it up, but I'll just share this one as well, because no, I just saying it's like, yeah,
we
man,
can't stop.
Yeah, that's all I ever try. Like, yeah, that's all I'm ever trying to use. Like, I'm triggering people. Some people say, oh yeah, it's like, but when you get it, you get it. Because it was through me understanding through horticulture, the role that, as I said, is fertility, man. It's like, right, it's really important. We call worm casting, gardener's gold. It's where I'm empowered by it, and like you said, but we use it derogatory, but in the same terms, the word shit, just to give the divinity, like it can be rooted back to ancient Egypt. And you find that the word shit is rooted in the word soot. It's rooted in the word Set Typhon being the son of the great mother, Lord of the Underworld, who later becomes negative like mushrooms, you know what I'm saying? But was originally the original Christ figure, when you just see, these cycles kind of just reflecting, like it's in mythology, but it happens in real life. The same thing happens in real life, and there's a lot that you could learn. And it was me having an experience on mushrooms where it took me into a piece of shit. I had a whole trip shit. A shit trip. It was like literally I was just tripping in shit. And it got me so intense. It became so beautiful that I came out of that whole experience like, shit is deep. And what I realized being in this big, it was literally just a piece of shit, like go into that shit. I was like, and I went into it. And what I realized, there was a whole world inside there, man. A beautiful world, a micro world in this big piece of shit. And it was basically trying to doing the same thing that this universe is doing, that we're doing on this planet. And it just made me respect shit on so many levels now. And I love taking shits. I love releasing myself and recycling myself. So all of that, it just hit home, man. I'm like, yeah, man, I'm going to flip it. I'm going to flip all these negative words, colonizing, even the N word. And we hear all these words, they've got negative connotations, but they didn't start off that way. It's just the landlords, not the gardeners, but the landlords who have flipped it. And they flipped it negatively. And that's just like where we got to kind of flip it back. We've got to take responsibility. Anyway, we can wrap up. Ashe.
Thank you for listening. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode and it has sparked some inspiration and creativity in you. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, join our experiences, and discover so much more over on allthatweare.org. We give space to our guests to share their perspective without debating it or fact-checking, as this approach allows for deep, unedited conversations from the heart. We trust your discernment and wisdom to take what is useful and challenge what isn't in your own understanding. We offer spaces for discussion and integration in our membership community, which we would love for you to join. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast. And so it's made possible with you, our beautiful community. If you loved this and would like to connect more deeply with us, please join our membership, retreats, and experiences. Share the episode with your friends and do drop us a note from time to time. Please hit subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen so that others can find us. This podcast is made by an all-female global team. All That We Are celebrates all that we are already and the untapped potential that lives inside us. It invites the full power of the more than human world, nature, the unseen, our ancestors, and our future generations. It reminds us that we never exist in silos through borders, timelines, or polarity. That in each and every moment, all that we are is here.